Call the Liberty Elementary School Board Governing Board meeting to order, June 5th, 2025, 4:30 p.m. here at the Jerry Rovey District Facility. 5 board members present, including Board Member Schmidt, Board Member Zimmerman, Vice President Kenyon, Board Member Cerncioni, and myself, Michael Todd. Next item of business will be item 1.2. Vice President Kenyon, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item of business is 1.3, approval of special meeting agenda.
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve this agenda with board policy. Sorry, let me start over. Motion to approve this agenda consistent with board policy BEDB and temporarily suspend governing board policy with which this agenda may be inconsistent.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, to approve the agenda. If there's no discussion, we'll take a vote. Board Member Schmidt,
Aye.
Board Member Zimmerman,
Aye.
Vice President Kenyon,
Aye.
Board Member Cerncioni.
Aye.
I'm also an aye. I will show that passed 5 yes, 0 no. Item 2.1, consideration and or action for governing board to have discussion and possibly take action regarding the next steps to fill the interim and or permanent superintendent position. Members, as you're well aware, we have a vacancy in the superintendent role in our district. I wanted to have this meeting as soon as possible to start discussing our next steps. Obviously, the only way we can do that is here in a board setting, so that's why we're doing it here. We'll start with, first of all, I'll ask council, do you have anything you want to say ahead of time or no?
Mr. President, members of the board, I know that this is not your first time in this situation, and you know that you have options. There are various avenues for you. One is to use an outside agency to help you find either an acting or a permanent position. The other is to do it yourself. I have had experience with a number of outside agencies that do this, either in Arizona or elsewhere. And of course, with respect to procurement, if you're under $10,000, you don't need to go through the RFP process. Available agencies are ASBA, Arizona School Administrators, which is doing quite a bit of searches, and then of course Ray and Associates, which is Gary Ray, or one of his former entity or his current entity. There's the McPherson entity. So you have a lot of choices. There are right now, and I can speak just from experience of our law firm, since we represent a large amount of school districts, there is a lot of movement going on among different school districts. New superintendents, interim superintendents coming off of that assignment. So there may be an available pool. I don't know, but there you are. I guess if I were structuring it, I think one idea would be to talk about whether you want to go for an interim or acting at this point, and wait till the normal cycle, which is months down the road.
Okay, members, we'll start with Ms. Schmidt. Can you give us any thoughts, input that you might have or want to share with the board?
Excuse me. Just some initial thoughts. I think that I would lean towards going with an acting superintendent for the time being to get us to a place where then we can be in the normal cycle and have the availability of anybody that would be in the normal hiring cycle, instead of just having the pool of people that would be available right now, which are, people who are only looking for acting positions potentially just to step in, or people who were not hired in the last hiring cycle, which would be a concern of mine. Also, I know we've discussed a bit, or it's been talked about, interviews and lengths of interviews and things like that. I hope that we can get to a point where we can discuss how we're going to do that process when we get there. I'm just bringing it up right now. I'm not saying we should get into the nitty gritty of that. It was just something off the top of my head. That's what I have for right this moment, but with the option to chime back in if something else pops in my head.
Thank you. Board Member Zimmerman.
Yeah, I'm just going to speak right now to whether I think we should go for an interim versus a permanent. And I believe that we should hire an interim for an entire year, with us looking for a superintendent or starting the process in the fall and working our way into the winter. The reason that I think we should be looking for an interim for an entire year is we are in a critical position currently in this district, and I don't feel that we have the option to go through an entire process right now. I think we need someone quickly to help lead this district forward, and I think it would be great to pull somebody that is a retired superintendent that has successful superintendent experience. And I think somebody outside the district will provide a clean slate for staff and for parents and community, and try to find a way to unite our community. I think that's really important right now. So I'd like the opportunity to speak more about the permanent search either later tonight or at a different time, but my recommendation would be to look for an interim quickly.
Thank you, Vice President Kenyon.
Thank you, President Todd. Thank you, Susan, for that. Ms. Siegel. At this time, I think the correct thing is looking at an interim. With that option, I believe only President Todd and myself were on the board for the last selection, and we had a pool of candidates that we were looking for an interim position, and then we let the candidates know that it's an interim position, but what's your thought? Are you looking for just interim, or are you looking for something interim plus maybe permanent if it works out for you? And that seemed to work. There were some that only wanted interim, and so there's others that they wanted interim, and then if it worked out for them, to stay in the district. I think it's a little bit hard to go for somebody who's, for a permanent position at this point in the cycle. The pool is so small, and it's I'm not going to say not the best, but it probably isn't the best right now, because the best superintendents are probably already have their contracts. And so those are the reasons why I would say it's probably best to look at an interim at this point. And in regards to whether we do it or we self-select, I've been through that process last time we used Ray and Associates, and it wasn't a bad process, but at this point, I would like to know more about what the process is for us to self-select. Mainly because of budget issues, but also, I think that we could probably find some pretty good candidates ourselves. That's all I have.
Thank you, Board Member Stronziani.
Just a couple things. So if we do an interim, I guess one question I had is we got to figure out, are we doing, someone mentioned for a couple months, someone mentioned for the whole year. One concern I had, just to play devil's advocate, one thing is if when you do an interim, it's hard for people to buy into what they're trying to do for that year. So if we're just trying to get a Band-Aid holder and not somebody that's actually going to put policy or put their spin on how they want something to run, then I'm okay with the interim. Just my experience in the business world, and it could be different. You guys have done this before hiring people, superintendents. It's hard for staff to do buy-in when they know that person's only going to be there for a little bit. So that's the only concern I have with doing the interim. I don't have an issue with doing an interim either. I'm just playing devil's advocate on that. And then I had some questions about the process, like Mr. Kenyon was saying, like if we use an outside agency, so they just like give us a list of candidates that are available, and then we look at like who we want to interview, or they do the interview and then give us like the top so many people. Like, how does that work?
President Todd, members of the board, Mr. Sicilioni, there's generally what they provide is the advertising, the screening, the selection system, which is sometimes you do this ordering them, and each one you rank them. But I would, if I proceed, Mr. Todd,
You may.
I would suggest that because you have some board members that are new to this and you want to get somebody in there, I suggest you contact ASA. Paul Teig is the president of ASA, but Mark Jornstadt is the person who does placements, and have him come out and explain to you the process. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to hire them, but he knows what's available out there as far as retired superintendents or administrators of any sort, and others that are just pinch hitting, and there's 2 or 3 of them out there for different school districts, and then they move on when you hire a permanent one. So I think you need somebody that understands the process, and this is particularly vital because you're adopting a whole new set of policies, and you need to have somebody that understands what policies mean and how they interface with your day-to-day operations. Maybe that's a little long-winded answer. No, but there's different degrees of services. I think some of the services that out-of-state companies supply for larger districts than yours are necessary for those districts, but may not be necessary for your district.
Thank you.
Thank you, members. I would echo what was, I think, summarized by fellow board members. I think an interim search at this point is the way to go. I suppose there's nothing prohibiting an interim. Let me rephrase that. We could make it as such that the interim is not eligible to apply for a permanent position down the road, or we can allow them to do that if they want. I've seen that be done both directions in other positions. Some are very specific that if you take this interim role, you absolutely cannot apply for the permanent position. Others have allowed that to happen. So that would be some discussion for the board to have. I have just done a little bit of research, and certainly there's a considerable amount of cost with the national search groups, the private organizations. The ASA is a nonprofit organization, and they basically charge costs. They're well under the $10,000 threshold, and I think most of the other ones are well over the $10,000 threshold. I'm not sure that what we got in the last process is, I guess the return on investment didn't come back as what I originally believed it would. So I appreciate Ms. Siegel's sentiments about the ASA. I think especially from an interim role, they know the landscape. If it's interim, it's most likely going to be somebody in state. I think having an in-state candidate is pretty critical to us, just especially in an interim role where they need to be all familiar with Title 15 and state laws, state politics. It's a pretty large learning curve to figure out Arizona education laws if you haven't lived here for a while. There's people that go on to be lawyers and spend lots of money and time in school to try to understand it. So I think especially for the interim position, having an in-state candidate or somebody that's well vetted, maybe by the ASA, I guess there's a possibility. What I don't want to do is get into flying people out. I think it is important that we try to fast track this, but on the same token, talking to staff members, they certainly would like to have an opportunity to meet candidates, or at least final candidates, and I think that is important. We learned some things from our previous round at this, and I think giving staff an opportunity, staff in the community an opportunity, whether we do that as a committee meeting or a reception type of deal, I think we can probably tie those up a day or two of interviews and a night or half day of committee meeting and still move relatively quickly with that. So those would be my ideas for this. I know that the ASA kind of does a la carte opportunity as well. So if we wanted to perhaps have all the applications sent to us and maybe we even create an internal group, or when I say internal, people here within the district, either parents, community members, cross-section of all the above, teachers, to identify candidates. That's another option we could look at. I'm sometimes a little concerned of an outside source saying we had, pick a number, 10, 20, 30, 35 in the last instance who have applied, and here's your best 5. I feel like maybe we want to have our own write our own destination with this a little bit different, a little bit better this time. So those would be things to consider for the board. And then we can, I guess, ask if you have any more thoughts or questions from here.
Mr. President.
You may go ahead.
I don't know if it's gonna put you and Mr. Kenyon on the spot, or if you want time to think about like when you guys went through this last time. Is there anything on top of your mind that was like shortcomings or lessons learned that we don't want to go back down that road again that you can share with us?
Well, I think the one thing to learn is this moves pretty quickly. As superintendents become, let me start over. As educators continue to promote, there's less and less positions available for them. So they grab their positions quickly. If they've got an offer and they think they're going to like it, they jump on it, because if it passes by, school districts are we're in no different situation than many other districts as far as needing a superintendent, needing a good one. So when they find one, they're going to move fast. And because there's a limited number of those positions available, you don't want to keep waiting for the next best opportunity and then find out it never came, and now you're out of the hiring season, everybody's hired and moved. So what I did find was this process moves pretty quick. We had Vice President Kenyon, I think you can help me with this, but I want to say we had 3, maybe 4 candidates within about 48 hours of our first round of interviews drop out because they took other positions. Some of those were pretty high on the list. In fact, if memory serves me right, our search firm had to reshuffle the deck because they were bringing us 10 candidates, and 4 of the 10 jumped out because they signed contracts. Not that they weren't interested in our district. They very much were, but they got an opportunity and they took it. Some go out of state, some stay in state. So it'll move quick. What I can say is that you get a limited time because this moves so fast. The feeling I got from every candidate we interviewed was, offer me the job tonight or I'm going to be gone tomorrow. And most of them were signed pretty quick. I mean, I looked back and kind of watched those folks on LinkedIn, and sure enough, when we notified them they weren't in the top 3, top 2, that top cut, within a matter of a couple of days, they were all announcing positions elsewhere. So they move quick. They don't wait around. They're not Major League Baseball players looking for the best trade. They move quickly. With that, it puts a little bit of pressure on us as a district, because if you've got a good one, same thing. If we find a good person and we're holding out for the next best may sign somewhere else, and then we've lost 2. So it is a tough process. I think more and more people are getting out of education as a whole, and so that makes that pool tighter or less desirable. Less desirable is probably not the word, but limited for sure, as to what's there. A lot of people are leaving the education field as a whole, and it's a tough spot. I think honestly, as we looked around and you start doing searches, every superintendent, let's put this into perspective. The word right now is that the average superintendent lasts for 18 months. That's what the average is. That means they're all coming with some sort of, or lack of better phrase, baggage or skeleton or whatever you want to call it. There's very few who are leaving their school districts, and the school district isn't sending them on their way, so to speak. So very hard to find that perfect candidate right now. And I think that will be one of the biggest challenges for any school board as you look at candidates. You know, well, they're 7 out of 10 points here. Can we find an 8? Can we find a 9? Ultimately, we want a 10. I don't know that the 10 exists. I don't even know if an 8.5 or an 8 exists right now. I hope it does, but it's very tough. And if you can find in education right now somebody that'll give you some information about anybody. So it is a tough process, and it's going to require the board to do some quick work, fast work. You try to get these all lined up in a row, so you're going to give up, 3, 4, 5 nights in a row to move forward, and you have to move quickly, but efficiently and accurately. And it's very hard. You're making a decision for a person who ultimately becoming a CEO of about a $38 million organization, and your time is limited with them for many reasons. First of all, they've got other opportunities, and they'll just flat tell you, I don't have time to meet with you a third time. I'm going to sign with somebody tomorrow. So here it is. And that sounds rough, but ultimately they're really in the driver's seat these days with the number of positions that are open. But at the same time, there's scarcity in that position. So that's kind of an oxymoron, but they're moving fast, and there are districts that are still hiring for superintendents. If you do a quick search in the newspapers, you see there's several superintendents in the state who are quote unquote on the bubble. Some of them were on the bubble and they worked it out and they're staying. Others are probably leaving. So even in talking to people now, we find that the hiring season has changed a lot. There's a lot of people who have left a district mid-year or at the end of the year and are still looking. I think you kind of alluded to that as well. Your firm's got, this is different. It used to be if you didn't hit that November timeframe to start looking, there was nobody available, but it is changing a little bit.
I suggest for you, first of all, Mr. Todd's correct. There now are there is a number of either retired former superintendents or high administrators to pick from that. Because they're retired, they don't really need money to live day to day. There's also some that have, just of their choice, decided to move on. I wouldn't assume that the people out there have flaws or whatever. There's some that where the board leadership changed, and so they want to change with that. So I would suggest a motion to appoint one of you to reach out to Mark Georgetown and have him come as soon as possible and meet with you, tell you about the process.
And Mark's with the ASA. Yeah.
He's the one that does.
Mr. Todd, can I make a few comments?
You may.
Thank you. I think it's really important that we do not make a decision quickly in fear that we're going to lose somebody. I think we need to be responsible in the process and ensure that we are vetting these people. And it's up to us to set the timeline. I think that you can have a good process and have it all occur in one day if you've done a lot of legwork ahead of time. And, although I have not served on the board, I have been a part of both of the last 2 superintendent searches. I sat on the committee for the superintendent before the last one. And I sat through, and those were about 20 people sat on that committee, all mix of stakeholders and community members across all the schools, and we were able to give that feedback. The board got that feedback, and then I sat through those 5 candidates that the committee interviewed. I also sat through their board interviews that afternoon. So they interviewed in the morning with the committee and interviewed with the board in live session, in open session, and then I also sat through the 2 for the last process that happened in 2023. I sat through those board interviews, and at that time it was an interim. There was no process for the permanent the board offered the interim the permanent position. So I think it's just important that we make sure we make a good decision and we not rush it out of fear. I do think that it's important to include the public. That was not included in the last time, and I think that's extremely important. My concern with doing it with the interim is how are we going to do that quickly? It's summer break. Are we thinking that we're not going to have an interim till August or September? Or are we, thinking we're going to do it in the next few weeks and who's available to come could come? Because I think it's going to hurt starting the school year out without having somebody in place, to lead us forward. And I hear what you said, Mr. Cincioni, about the Band-Aid and staff not buy-in. But at this time, I'm not looking as the interim as like an interview process for that person. I just want somebody that can kind of, lead us, but not necessarily make like sweeping changes, right? And that we really do focus on the permanent search. And that's when we're really, looking about who's going to lead us into a 5-year plan. And I do think it's possible that superintendents can stay for a long time. When we went to the West Valley, West Side Impact, we were recognizing superintendents that have been in their district for 20 years. And I looked around and, I know the history of this district and I was like, wow, it really is possible. And so it honestly gave me a little bit of hope that maybe we could find that person, because I feel like our district, our community, our staff deserve that kind of permanency. So, I would love for the board to have a discussion about what is the timeline to find an interim, because I think that's important. But it's obviously up to Mr. Todd to further the discussion.
No, I agree. Just to clarify, I'm not saying that we do need to rush. I don't want to make a bad choice. I just, when asked the question, you get a limited time and they will move on. So if I misspoke on that, I want to be clear. You'll just find yourself, as we did, it took us a few days just to get the board together available for interviews, and in that time we lost candidates. So I was just trying to explain for board member Cincioni the process a little bit, and what I saw is one of the pitfalls. If you're not available, it's they move quick, they don't wait for you. But I do agree with you, board member Zimmerman. Making the right selection is important. It is a tough process. There's no doubt about it. It's a tough process, and it's become tougher. Those longtime superintendents who started off and have worked their way up and spent 20 years in a district weren't the superintendent for the most time for 20 years. And that's, from everybody I've talked to, that's kind of a legacy approach now that's just unfortunately not happening. I'm not saying I agree with what's happening now, but the lifespan has just changed a lot for that position because of things. I certainly agree we should specify out. It sounds like we have a guidance for interim, and I would be willing to take some information or some recommendations as far as goals of when we'd like to do this. We can, if you guys want, you can give me permission via vote to reach out to the ASA, and we can find out when they're available to come in to present with us, and we can go that route. Talking to some other boards around this state, it does sound like they're the most affordable that's out there, and everybody has told me the same thing. The under $10,000, I think they're there. So that's that helps us a little bit as well. We don't have to do an RFP. So with that, Ms. Zimmerman, do you have a timeline that you're thinking would be appropriate, or recommend to start the process further? Have the position filled? Maybe that's the better part.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I was thinking July 1. That was my personal thought. I don't know if that is doable. I can't think of a better word. But, it's certainly going to require the board to be committed to meet in the next couple weeks. But I think it would be great, as we are hiring, or hopefully hiring, a lot of district staff. And if we're hiring an interim, that interim is present when they start, and can kind of set the tone. That's my personal goal.
Okay, so members, we have a meeting next Tuesday. Already, it's a budget meeting. It's gonna be rather long. I think we're going to need to work into schedules of the ASA to present. Would sometime like the 18th, 17th or 18th, would that work for us to meet for a presentation by the ASA? I don't know if that gives us enough time. Then what I would say is, based off of their input, we'd be meeting sometime the next week, a little bit at the mercy of when the candidates can come together. It may be, as I'm looking at the dates here, we might miss the July 1st date by a week or so, but I think we can certainly shoot for July 1.
I'll just make a comment. I agree that Tuesday could be long, but I kind of prefer to just do it all at once, or later in the week on Thursday. I think the sooner we can get them on the books, the 17th or 18th, that's, almost 2 weeks from now. So I'd like to move quicker, but.
I can certainly, with board permission, we can ask them to come out for the next meeting Tuesday. I just don't know if they'll be available then. And I have some travel that I have to tend to the vast majority of actually the entire week after our board meeting. So that's why I was looking to do it the following week. But if we take action, we can try to get them here Tuesday.
Yeah, I think it's worth asking. I realize that would be a quick turnaround, but is it something that you could join virtually, just for the presentation so that we can get the process started, or you're not going to be available?
I'm going to be in completely different time zones, and I'm not sure how available I'll be quite yet.
Mr. President, members of the board, I suggest you keep it open-ended, but no later than 7 days from 7 calendar days from today, for example, and see when they're able to come out. as soon as possible.
We can do that.
Mr. President, if I may.
You may.
I agree that the sooner we get this rolling, the better. It needs to be, if we can start the school year having somebody in that position, it would be a wonderful thing for our district, for stability, for many different reasons. But I would be okay with having you, President Todd, being the one of the board who reaches out to the ASA and tries to figure out their schedule, tries to set something up. That way we can get more information. If we end up going with them, we end up going with them. That's a conversation later, but I think it's more important that we just get the information, see what's available out there, and just try to get this ball moving as soon as possible.
Okay. We could do that. I think I'll take a board action of a motion for that, and we'll work to get it scheduled as soon as possible.
So, I'll make a motion to appoint President Todd to reach out to the ASA regarding the interim and/or permanent superintendent search. And I have that written down for you, Ms.
And I'll second it, Minnie. Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
I got a procedural question. When we have like discussions like this, can you make multiple motions under one agenda item? Okay.
You can. Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Is there any discussion?
There was some conversation around making the motion have a timeline.
Within 7 days, correct?
Yes, so I don't know if Mr. Kenyon wants to amend the motion or if you left it that way.
Yeah, I don't think I need to amend the motion. I think President Todd understands the will of the board there.
Okay. All right, so we have the motion and second to authorize me to reach out to the ASA, schedule them I'll do that as soon as possible. If there's no further discussion, we'll take the vote. Ms. Schmidt,
Aye. Excuse me, aye.
Ms. Zimmerman,
Aye.
Vice President Kenyon,
Aye.
Board Member Strencioni.
Aye.
I would show that proof 5 yes, 0 no. All right, members, that takes us to item 3.1, board comments on agenda topics and items for future consideration.
I think I've said this before, but if it doesn't, if I realize that it takes time to get things on the agenda. So if we could just, I am asking for a copy of the climate survey results and comments, if that could just be sent to the board, and then at a later time it could be an agenda item. So I just wanted to specify my request.
Okay, we have talked to staff, and he's still compiling all of that information. It's in draft form, so I think it will be their goal to get it out as soon as it's completed. But it is on the list, and we will get it. I promise. Is there anything else? Okay, members, I had a conversation today with some principals. They met with Dr. Mahorn earlier today, and I had a chance to speak with them for a little bit. They have recommended that they would like to come and have kind of a work session and discussion with the board, and I've committed to them that I would do everything I could to expedite that process before the start of the school year. Again, I think we've got a lot going with the superintendent search, but I just want to surface that and let you know that'll probably come as a special meeting where we can tap into some of their knowledge base, and they can pose some questions, and we can just have a discussion, much like a round table. Not where so much decisions are being made, but more of a round table discussion and an opportunity to ask questions, have them ask questions back and forth in a professional manner. So I think that will be forthcoming at some point as a special meeting. We'll send out ask Ms. Camerata to send out a doodle poll or whatever she's doing for that to check dates. But I did tell them that I would work on that. That's something they would like, and I think it's very beneficial to the board. We're in a position now where we can do that. So that's the only thing I just kind of want to throw out there for warning, unless somebody strongly objects to it. I just assured them that I would work hard to get that done. So
I would second that.
great. Anything else for agenda items?
Can I just ask if it should be done prior to the budget?
We're trying to do that, but the budget starts Tuesday. So we've got to check with their availability. They have some vacations, and we thought it would be important to have all of them. They felt the same thing, to have all of them present.
Okay.
We also have some new principals that will be starting July 1. And so that was my message to them. Kind of communication was, do you want to do it before July 1 or after July 1? Don't tell me now. Let's get back to it in a couple days and figure out what's best. And I think this might become more of a regular occurring event in the future. I think there's, as I said, I think we're finally in a position where we can have the ability to meet. Dr. Mahorn's been very supportive of that idea, and I'm excited about that opportunity. But we'll work with them a little bit more to figure out what schedules are like. They all have a return date right of July 14th. So several of them are sporadically on vacation between now and July 14th. After July 14th, the district has told them they all need to be back in the saddle, so to speak, and be ready to go. So we'll work on some times, dates, and get back with you on that. All right, if there's nothing else, we'll move. Excuse me, my apologies. Upcoming board meetings. We will get to see everybody bright and early Saturday, June 7th. That's in 2 days for a special board meeting for policy chapter 5 of the trust. And then we'll have a meeting Tuesday, June 10th. That'll be mostly budget related. There are some other items on the agenda, and we're going to try my best to get ASA, if they're available, to come for that as well. I think that's currently scheduled for a 4:30 or 5:30 start. Do you know? On the 10th. It's 5:30. 5:30. Members, would it at all be possible to, if we can get ASA to start that at 4:30 so that we can get business going? Or perhaps, is there any objections to starting at 4:30? All right, I'm hearing no objections. So if we can, we'll try to get that started at 4:30. I'll let you know, Ms. Cameron, after we talk to ASA. I'll make the phone call to them first thing tomorrow. All right. We're on to 5.1, the adjournment of the meeting. We've included all the business for this agenda. It's 5:10. We'll show the meeting adjourned.